So, published a piece. It was quite a comprehensive, well, from my perspective, comprehensive breakdown of the different instances in which class manifests in the day-to-day life of people who share my experience of society. One of the things about the piece that I have to say is that I wrote it with a middle class audience in mind, and so I knew that it was going to be challenging for a lot of people to read because they're reading it, and part of them is thinking, this is interesting, this is informative, and another part of them is thinking, is this me? And that's really challenging, especially because invariably everyone goes about their life with the best of intentions. So it would be very difficult and hard not to feel criticised with some of the things that I said in it. Now, one of the paradoxes that some people have tried to point out to me, what they think is a paradox, is that it's written in that style and therefore it's not involving other people from the working class background. Some people in the discussion, however, these kind of pieces are just one method of output that I do. So I've wrote about 16 music albums for working class young people so far, where it's all geared towards expressing things in a way that is more indicative of that culture and that background, right? When I'm working in Priesthill, when I'm working in Easterhouse, when I'm working in Cranhill, wherever I'm working in deprived communities, right, working class communities, then I'm not talking in the same way that I do in these articles, right? You know, so I actually, my article is influenced by the fact that I move among all of these spheres, right? So I can talk to somebody in the street, I can talk to a drug addict, a homeless person, and then I can go and talk to a social worker, a teacher, a politician, whoever, and I instinctively know, what set of tools am I bringing into that conversation, and that's adaptations I've went through in my life. So I don't just sit in one area and make big generalisations about other people, right? So what do I mean by middle class, right? Now, obviously, there are exceptions to every single rule, and it is arguable, at least, that class, as it's been previously defined, is less relevant now. But what you'll see is it's just been split into more subsections because the inequality is widening, right? So for me, middle class is having a larger margin for error, right? So it's when your family is able to emotionally and financially and psychologically cope with things like a sudden death, right, in the family, a crisis, someone losing their job. Middle class is being able to go to university at a really young age, not knowing what you want to do, failing, going back, failing and going back, right? It's when middle class is when politicians care about your vote, right? And not just in the rhetorical sense. It's when policy itself is devised and shaped with the aspirations, interests and problems of people in a middle class background in mind. And this is reflected across the political spectrum, catering to different types of tastes, right, and values and morals. For me, middle class it's not so much a specific set of values, but a manner of expressing whatever values you hold. So in my experience, on the whole, middle class people have less of a tendency for overt forms of aggression. So I was in a cafe a couple of months ago and it was very busy. I was personally feeling really stressed out, and someday they went over to the wee bit to sit and took a couple and they dropped the tray everywhere everywhere, and it all fell and smashed and made a big mess. It was really loud. I jumped, and after 2 seconds of quiet, everyone started laughing. Right? Everyone started laughing. Whereas where I come from, what was more likely to happen is people were going to start blaming each other for who it was, whose fault it was that dropped the thing, and it would turn into a big fight. Right? No, generally, but on the whole, that's how I imagine it would go down, right? So no less tendency for stress, but middle class people use stress as almost a motivator, you know what I mean? Whereas it becomes chronic stress in communities, and working class communities and deprived communities, is debilitating. And impacts really, really deeply on your perception of the world around you, yourself, your place within it, your abilities. So, you know, that's something that I've, in my experience, is markedly different. It's when you don't have to live in chronic day-to-day stress, right, and self-doubt due to economic and social circumstances. It's when you have more chance of not only becoming aware or being encouraged to become aware of your potential, but also you have more chance to realise your potential. Now, there are some murky areas when it comes to disposable income if you're using economic indicators to define it, right? So I could live in a flat with someone from a middle class background, i.e. their parents are both professionals, right? Now I could have the same disposable income and work the same job as that person in my flat. We could be eating the same super noodles. So essentially, you know, for us, we're living in the same level of whatever, right? But if I lose my job, I can't afford to live in that flat anymore, right? So I have to leave. But the person from a middle class background may or may not be able to access support from their parents to help them when they're struggling with rent, right? Also, their parents might have parents themselves who are still alive, because middle class people live longer, right? So that grandparent dies in their 80s, right? The parents inherit, you know, a home. Maybe it's worth, you know, a few $100,000, right? And so they invest some of that money into a deposit for my flatmate to then get onto the property ladder, right? So his circumstances and my circumstances are the same, but the whole sort of the whole circumstance around, you know, around my flatmate is the opportunities are there, right? And I'm not saying that's not because people haven't worked hard. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's just pure chance where you're born, and where you're born, depending on the social circumstances dictated by the economic circumstances, it has a fundamental impact on your emotions, your attitudes, your abilities. And so people who come from a middle class background have probably not been exposed to such harsh formative conditions, in which in the first few years of your life, if you come from a disadvantaged background, you've got more chance of picking up emotional habits that won't serve you well later in life. And these are the things that some middle class people find difficult to understand, because all the things that I'm saying that they have as advantages are normal for them. So they are like, no, but this is normal for me. Like, so they don't have that insight to know that it's not actually normal where I come from. So I think like there are exceptions to this, but on the whole, in my experience, middle class people tend to be more confident, have higher self-esteem. They're from a more emotionally secure family where people get angry less, shout less violence, where people are validated and encouraged, have access to resources and financial support when things are difficult. They go on holidays abroad often. they're better educated and also they're better behaved in school because they're not dealing with psychosocial stress at the very core of them, so they're able to listen better. Their diet might even be better, things like that. You know, all these things that regulate our bodies. And when a crisis hits a middle class family, on the whole, they've got fundamental building blocks in place emotionally, financially, intellectually, to absorb the strain of that without the fabric of the family unravelling. So when I talk about class, that is what I mean, right? That is what I mean. Whatever the indicators are out there, the official indicators, whatever, when I'm talking about working class, middle class, that is what I'm talking about, right? That is what I'm saying. So I'm not saying a middle class person's life's easier, or that they got things easier, or that they've not worked hard. I'm saying it's a different set of challenges for each person from each community. And the problem lies in the fact that people who haven't experienced those harsher conditions are the ones who shape the policies in the society which is trying to deal with the people who live in those harsher conditions. And so we lose things in translation, and that is the whole fundamental point, and that prevails and permeates in every single aspect of society, in my humble opinion. Anyway, peace.